All right, so good morning again. And so let me start by saying to those of you who took the time to say to me that just through the first lesson in the Boundary series that it blessed you, it benefited you. Thank you for taking the time to share that because I recognize that you didn't have to do that. And sometimes as a teacher, as a minister, we know what we've been given, but we don't know if it's having the impact, Janet, that we want it to have and that I believe God intends for it to have. So it's my prayer in this series that, as we said on last week, we'll be able to create a healthy life with mindful limits. But this series requires us to do some analysis. It requires us to take some inventory so that we can see where a boundary is needed and establish a boundary, define the scope of the territory, be willing to insert some consequences, and as we said on last week, facilitate the flow in of good and the release of that which no longer serves us. You already know this, but it bears repeating that we are threefold beings. Is that right? We are spirit, we are souls, and we are bodies. As spiritual beings, we are made in the image and likeness of God, and we sometimes have to be reminded that this is the truth about us. As thinking beings, as feeling beings, as I said on last week, our interactions with other people influence, inform, and form who we find ourselves becoming. You've heard me say this before, that there are 6 primary relationships that we all live into. There is the God relationship, the God connection, the self relationship, the self connection, the mate relationship with whoever your significant other is, the parent connection, the child connection, and the friend connection. All of these relationships help to inform, influence, and form who we come to be. So the one I want to focus on today, as we are looking at the responsibility of boundaries, is the self-connection. Someone say self-connection. Put this in your notes. We defined a boundary as a line or point of demarcation that marks the limit of an area. We said that boundaries help us distinguish what is our responsibility to take care of. On last week, we talked about establishing boundaries that support how we move in the world and how we expect others to move in the world so that they can function within the framework of what we've created. You remember me saying that last week? We also said that boundaries, physical ones anyway, are easy to see. They're easy. Like if you see a fence or a gate or a sign that says do not enter, like those are all easy to recognize, yes? But what about our internal world? What about the space that exists where there ought to be a symbolic gate, but there is none? See, personal boundaries, somebody say personal boundaries, are the limits we decide will work for how we want to treat ourselves, what we will and won't do, and what we have come to expect from ourselves. Personal boundaries or internal boundaries are intended to be the stop sign that says, I will go no further than this. But in our scripture reference, we see an interesting conflict. And so when the Apostle Paul is writing his letter to the church in Rome, he highlights something, he highlights a conflict that I don't believe is just unique to the Apostle Paul. I believe we all, to some degree or another, experience this same internal conflict. in his letter to the church in Rome, he writes, I don't understand my own actions. He says, the things that I want to do, I don't do those things. And yet somehow I manage to do the things that I hate. Now, the New Revised Standard Version, I'm particularly fond of how they classify it, right? In some other versions, it says, I do not do the things I want to do, and I do the things I don't want to do. But when the New Revised Standard Version says, I don't do the things I want to do, and I do the things I hate, for me, that means that I keep blowing past a stop sign, and not only am I blowing past it, it doesn't even feel good to me. How many of you know what that's like? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I'm with the right people. And so as we grapple with the responsibility to understand our own actions, as we grapple with the inconsistency between not doing what we want to do, but doing what we hate, I submit to you that part of that expression is a byproduct of poor internal boundaries. And so if we intend to have our life be consistent, meaning I do what I say I want to do, and I don't do the things that upset and disturb me, it requires us to have some strong internal boundaries. Here is the challenge. The law of familiarity says the more time we spend around anything, we begin to take it for granted just a little bit. What am I saying? I'm saying the more time I begin to spend with myself, I begin to take myself for granted just a little bit. The more time I spend in my spirit, I can begin to take my spirit for granted just a little bit. And one of the most dangerous things to a relationship is to take someone or something for granted. And so what I want to do today is just teach through how we can begin to, put this in your notes, catch ourselves, correct ourselves, and connect ourselves whenever we find ourselves blowing past the boundaries of self. Now, I want to make another delineation. There is more than one self, you. There is the self that appears as you right now, and there is the self that the revealing word calls the expression of the divine. And so what I really want to be able to teach toward today is setting up boundaries that protect the self of you that is divine. How's that? Y'all not interested? Then talk to me. All right. Personal boundaries equip us with the ability to successfully navigate the internal conflict that I call the dilemma of discontent. Here's what I mean. There are some things that I think and feel that I know are inconsistent with what I want to think and feel. There are some things that I say that I know are inconsistent with what I want to experience. There are some things that I do that I know are inconsistent with who I believe myself to be. Right? So oh my God. So when you jump in front of me in traffic and you make me slam on my brakes and my cup of tea goes flying forward, who do I or when you rush to the line with your 15 items in the 10 item or less line, and you see me coming, but you just gotta get in front, you just need a win for the day. Or when I'm dressed just like this, walking down Michigan Avenue, and I approach the Cartier store, and the lovely lady about to enter jumps in the door and pulls it closed behind her because apparently I look like a threat. What do I do when my sense of self is in conflict with the experience that I'm having? What do I do when I hear words flying out of my mouth that I wouldn't say to you from this platform? How do I establish boundaries that give me the ability to catch and correct and connect myself when it's important to my sense of self? Are you with me? As I can empathize with the Apostle Paul when it comes to doing what I don't want to do and not doing the very thing that I hate. And the challenge for me is I understand that there is no such thing as undemonstrated understanding. So if the Apostle Paul were here so that I could take the light off of me, I would say to him, it only shows up because it is in your mind. I would say to him, you think you don't understand it, but you understand it very well. I would say to him, it continues to show up and it will keep showing up until you put some boundaries in place that give you the ability to reconnect to yourself. And so the first boundary that I want us to build around is the boundary of how we honor our thoughts and feelings. How many of you know that no thought lives in your head rent-free? Every thought that you hold will either be a support of your internal boundary or it will be an encroachment on your internal boundary. I am eternally grateful to the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman for teaching me how to intentionally use what I had been using all the time. To teach me that there is power in the way I think, that there is power in my thought. One day, I bet with my older sister that I would watch a scary movie. Like, I've never really been fond of scary movies. Like, I just don't get the mindset of sitting before something and intentionally although, that doesn't mean we don't do it from time to time with just the way we think. The movie is just playing out on the screen of our mind and not on the big screen. Are you with me? But I bet my older sister Pam that I could watch a movie. She knows that I'm not really a fan of that genre. So, I can't not accept the challenge from my older sister. And so my mom is at work And I settle in to take in this particular flick. I watched the whole thing from beginning to end. And as you can imagine, I am on edge, jumpy, nervous, hear a sound, and you been there? And so the movie wraps up, and the apartment is dark. And I look to my sister's room, and her bedroom is on the way to my bedroom. And so I call, I say, Pam, turn on your light and stand in your doorway. So she comes, like good big sister, turns on her light. She stands in the doorway. Now, the living room is probably no more than 30 feet from the living room to my bedroom down the hall, probably 20 feet down the hall. And so she's standing there for me, and I say, just hold tight and while I turn this TV off and get ready to go to the room. And so I get ready to get up to turn the TV off, but I can't move, and I start screaming, they got me, they got me. And she said, just unhook your pajama belt from the furniture, fool. What happened? Just taking in began to shape and form and influence my thoughts and my feelings. I was perfectly I was perfectly safe, but I scared myself. And so how do we establish boundaries in the way that we think so that we can honor thinking that supports the larger self? Imelda Shanklin says we have to ask ourselves, what are we cultivating? I want you to ask yourself that question. What am I cultivating? What consciousness, what thoughts, what feelings are you cultivating? Because just like me in that living room with my pajamas attached to the furniture, you might be thinking and feeling some things that have you scared out of your wits' end that is no threat at all. How do you bring yourself back out of a cultivation that doesn't work for you and begin to cultivate the thoughts that help you have the experiences you desire, or experiences that are consistent with yourself? She says that we can cultivate the individuality by, one, listening to the still small voice deep down within us. That means that sometimes we're going to have to silence the noise so that we can hear the direction. But you got to cultivate that listening. It is a listening that helps develop your individuality. We know there is a difference between our persona and our individuality. Is that right? The persona of me is the mask that I wear. It's the role that I call myself feeling. It's what I project to the world to help you think that I am something other than I am. But the real of me is made in the image and after the likeness of God. And there is nothing to prove. There is nothing to show. There is only the opportunity to be that which I am. So which one are you cultivating? She said you have to learn to cultivate it by listening to the whispering of the still small voice. But then she said we also have to boldly follow. See, it does take courage and boldness to walk by faith and not by sight. It takes boldness and courage to keep putting one foot in front of the other when the diagnosis is trying to tell you that you can't walk no more. It takes courage and boldness and tenacity to continue to remember that God is my unfailing, never-ending source of supply. But you have to remind yourself over and over and over and over and over again, because there is a stream of thought maybe that you've been holding that does not mind reminding you that there is enough and you are not enough. See, we don't just get to the place where we think there's not enough. It's because we've been cultivating that mindset rather than cultivating the true, pure sense of self. Are you with me? She says, not only do we have to listen to the whispering of the still small voice, and not only do we have to boldly follow what we hear the Lord saying to us, but we also have to be willing to do that even if it makes us different from other people. How many of you know that sometimes when you stand out, it means standing alone? But if you cultivate the awareness of oneness, you are never alone. Because one with God is indeed a majority. Now she said, we can cultivate our individuality, but we can also cultivate our personality. How do we do that, Imelda? She says, by listening to the voices that are outside of ourselves. And by being governed by motives that are not consistent with the highest version of ourselves. Can I let you in on a secret? Put this in your notes. Your consciousness is your life. You live in your consciousness. And because you live in your consciousness, you live out of your consciousness. So let me give you some metaphysical boundaries to help you navigate your consciousness. The first is to bring yourself back to seeing with metaphysical eyes. What does that mean? That means not just settling for looking at the thing as it appears. The Christian metaphysician is trained to see beyond the appearance. But you can't see beyond it if you don't look hard. Are you with me? What's another boundary for catching yourself and correcting yourself? Denials are a boundary. Affirmations are a boundary. They give us the ability to honor our thoughts and feelings in a way that are consistent with the best and highest of us. How do we honor our feelings? Put this in your notes, and I said this last week. Establishing boundaries is a form of self-care. What do I mean? I mean, you have to develop and cultivate the ability to be compassionate with yourself. What do you mean be compassionate with myself, Rev? I mean, stop being critical of you. There are more than enough people who will remind you about all of the ways you're doing it wrong. You don't have to join the critical chorus. There will be more than enough people to share their judgments with you about you, even though their judgments are their projections. And I want to caution you against making someone else's projections your problem. It's okay if you have to judge yourself, but remember how the master teacher said it. He said, if you're going to judge yourself, judge righteously. Judge yourself what? According to who you are in truth. Judge yourself as the spiritual being that you are, because you are not what you do. Are you with me? Yes, we have to learn how to be compassionate with ourselves. And be willing to empathize with ourselves in the same way that we do for others. How do we do it? How do we cultivate the emotion that supports us? We have to cooperate with ourselves. Right? In the way we think, in the way we feel, in the way we speak, in the way we act, and in the way we react. Like, you can't expect someone else to honor and love you if you won't honor and love yourself. That is how we teach the universe and others how it goes for us. So we must be willing to cooperate with the best that is in ourselves. You got to lift it up and be kind to yourself. Right? When's the last time you were willing to stand up inside yourself, for your kindness, right? You have to stand up inside yourself for yourself. I am my friend. Yeah, repeat after me. I am my friend. And the same compassion and cooperation and kindness you show to your friends. Now, if you're not a good friend, let me say it to you this way. Well, no, let me not do that. Because you didn't stop teaching and start meddling. I don't want to meddle. How do we do it? How do we honor the self that we are? How do we honor the presence of God expressing in, through, and as us? We honor our words. We honor our words. As I was just saying, you have to be willing to be a host for your greatness and speak out of that awareness. Scripture says life and death are in the power. Scripture says, my words don't return to me void, but they accomplish wherever I send them. There is power expressing through what I'm saying. And so then I have a responsibility as one of my boundaries to begin to speak life into my life, to begin to speak life into those things that are important to me, to begin to speak life even to the appearances as they show up. See, one of the things about the power of the spoken word is if you say it enough, it will begin to transform your being. See, sometimes we're not able to move in the ways we want to move because we're telling ourselves the wrong story. Right? We're telling ourselves, we're reminding ourselves, we're rehearsing over and over and over again the pain and the suffering. But let me share something with you. The heart of love never tells the old story too often. It always talks about the time you made it through and the time you overcame and the time when you didn't think you could make it, but you did. There is something pulling you up out of the condition, but you got to talk about it. You got to be willing to speak to the challenge. You got to be willing to speak to the difficulty. You got to be willing to speak to your body. You got to talk to your finances. I know it might not be showing up right now, but I intend to be in the flow because God is my never-ending source of supply, and there is no limitation in what God has done. Let me share something with you. Put this in your notes. In the spirit, it is now. See, in the spirit, it's always now. So why do we need the faith? Because the faith, the perceiving power, helps us to see not what's coming, but what's in the now. Oh my God. See, when you understand that God is an instant God, then the work is to bring yourself up to begin to see and think and talk and feel in what God is, in the isness of God, not in the wasness of the experience. And so I've got to speak life to it. I love the I Will Live song. That's one of my favorite songs, low key. Why? Because I intend to be a part of stuff that's committed to living. Right? I'm heading into my 50th. I intend to see, no, don't clap yet. Clap after this. I intend to see the next decade be far better than the last decade. And check it. Can I be honest with you? With the exception of a few bumps, life has been good to me. Right? With the exception of a few moments in the pit, but it's the pit experience that prepares you for the palace. With the exception of a few difficulties that I had to go through in order to become who I'm supposed to be, life has been good to me. Low-end kid, check. Mommy raised me by herself, check. On welfare, eating cheese sandwiches, check. Gotta go to the place down the street to get a little food, check. Hanging at my auntie's house and hear this voice coming from my grandmother's room, check. It's the voice that changed my life. Life has been good to me. And if I were to take a guess, life has been good to you too. And watch this, watch this, watch this. Do you think a right now God is done? There is more health for you to experience. There is more joy for you to experience. There is more life for you to experience. There's more money for you to get. There's more prosperity for you to enjoy. There are more relationships that affirm the truth about you than there ever will be for people who don't know who you are. It's okay if they don't know who you are. That's just a sign that they ain't supposed to roll with you into your next iteration. As the Reverend Joe used to say, knock the dust from your heels and get the dirt off your shoulders so that you can be free of the luggage of somebody who doesn't know who they're traveling with. But you can't experience it if you don't know who you are. So you've got to be willing to resonate at your greater self. You got to be willing to resonate, to develop, to cultivate your greater self. You can't talk average conversation and expect to be awesome. It doesn't work like that. You will never outperform your proclamations. So I gotta say, want shows up in conversation. Expectation shows up in action. So what do you expect? What are you prepared to do? What actions are you prepared to take? See, we say that when we think right and when we feel right and when we speak right, right thinking, right feelings, right words. Yeah. Let me hear you say that one in unison. Those of you who know it, hold tight right there. Hold tight. We're gonna it's call and response. Let me flow with me. You'll know when I'm ready to bring you in. Right thinking, right feeling, right words. See, what we cannot neglect is the latter part of the law of demonstration. See, there is no such thing as God bless me, but don't require me to do anything. Right? Blind Bartimaeus has got to get himself positioned by the side of the road where Jesus is coming through. The man sitting by the pool of Bethesda, he's got to get himself to the place where when the master teacher says, stand up, he's got to take the action to stand up. You can't have the breakthrough if you're going to just keep sitting down. So if you intend to experience the greater version of yourself, and listen, you ought to be in somebody's class developing your soul. You get to have more, do more, be more, and give more because you can become more. More what? More aware, more loving, more understanding, more patient. There are so many lessons. You're this close. This close. Some of you. Some of you. Some of us are. And some of us. And some of us. Can I let you in on a secret? You get to choose. God is as instant. God is as instant. It just takes the switching of the way you think and feel. It just takes the swiftest, slightest change of the things you say. It just takes me putting myself into action. And when I do those things, the demonstration must show up. And so it's critical that I have the boundaries that give me the ability to stop when I'm thinking things that are inconsistent with what it is I say I want to have. It's critical that I shift my emotional state when the conversation starts to make me feel bad about myself. It's critical that I know in the moment how to change that emotional state. So it's not your responsibility to make me feel better. It's my responsibility to remind me that I am loved. I'm going to close with this. I was sharing with someone not long ago when I spoke in Sacramento for at the Unity Church there. Went to the place where they have breakfast. It's escaping me. And we are in the restaurant and getting my food, and I'm noticing I'm the only one in there who flows like me. And then I start to feel like I'm not welcome. Now, there are no red hats that say, "Make America Great Again." But I just, we are vibratory beings, so you can feel when the energy is off. And like I said, I'm the only one in there who flows like me. And so I'm having to bring myself back to the experience I want to have. See, because I'm getting ready to go do the lesson, and I don't want to take into that teaching experience the sense that I am not enough or that I am not welcome. Because I'm going to approach that thing whole differently than if I understand that I am in the flow of love. And so because I'm intentional about what I want to experience in the face of what's appearing, I began to say to myself, oh, not only do you belong, you are here to facilitate the transformation, right? And so I just began to bathe myself in the light of love. But I'm not selfish like that. So I just let it permeate and fill up the whole room. Like all of y'all get a taste of this because I'm the only one who flows quite like this in this room right now. And so we just share it with everybody, right? Because there is plenty of love to spare and to share. And so we just let it flow. Just like the men today. Doc, thank you. Reverend McDowell, thank you. Just like the men today. Men, stand up. I want you to help these men feel the love for the reminder that they gave us for love in action today. Men all over the room, stand up. Let us love you. Let us love you all over the room. Because listen, we have the ability to transform the environment because we bring the light into the perceived darkness. And so we're just letting it out, letting it flow. Before I knew it, I had recalibrated myself. Before I knew it, I knew I belonged. Before I knew it, I knew that I was in the right place. And then I also realized that I didn't just come up there to get oatmeal. I came to bring this light to wherever I was. Because the commitment that I've made, the intention that I set, is to be a being of love. And so, to you, I say, maybe there are some boundaries that can be set so that when you blow past the stop signs of honoring your true self, you catch it. You just notice how it makes you feel in the moment. Just check out how you feel when you gossiping. Is it affirming? When you're being critical of somebody else, like, is that affirming you? When you're judging, how does that make you feel? Forget about the other person. I am always my own experience. How does that make you feel? Catch it. Say, catch it. Then correct it. How do you correct it? You have to give yourself a better thinking or better feeling alternative. Remember, repeat after me. I am the thinker who thinks the thought that makes the thing. Give yourself a better thinking alternative. Give yourself a better feeling thought. And then speak it. Once you catch it and correct it, it's okay if you call yourself out on it, even if it's just for you. No, dog, we're better than that. No, baby, we can do it better than that. Let's try that again. Let's go back and rewind. Let's forgive it. Let's start over. Let's erase the slate. Because you're more powerful than you realize. You are the image, likeness of God. The light of God moves with you. And so when you walk into a space, the space might require you to turn your light on. And when you turn it on, it doesn't take a whole lot of light to transform a dark room. And so I want to encourage you to make sure you set the boundaries that give you the ability to be the very best version of yourself. I love you. God bless you.